The blizzard came in like a curse, tearing across the high plains of the Wyoming Territory in 1874. Wind roared like some starving beast, hurling snow so thick it blanketed the world in white silence. Somewhere in that merciless whiteness, a figure moved, slow, deliberate. A man in a long coat, dark as coal, hunched against the storm. Elias Boone knelt in the frozen ground, gloved hands trembling as he scooped the last of the cold, crusted dirt over a small grave. A crude wooden cross leaned beside it, barely holding its shape in the wind. In his palm sat a toy, a tiny carved horse, its legs broken but lovingly smoothed over. He placed it atop the grave with care, brushing snow from the name carved into the wood, Lucy. Elias closed his eyes. His lips moved in prayer, silent against the storm, and when he opened them again, there was nothing behind them but wind and ghosts. He stood. The snow took the grave back in minutes. Across the hills, lanterns flickered in the windows of a ramshackle mining town. Elias turned toward them, his boots crunching across frozen earth. The saloon stank of sweat, spilled whiskey, and bad men with worse tempers. The kind of place where folks came to forget their names. A battered piano played itself stupid in the corner, while a game of cards got too loud near the bar. Elias stepped in, the wind at his back cut off as the door slammed shut behind him. No one greeted him. No one ever did. A drunk prospector, his face red and raw, staggered up onto a table like it was a stage. With one arm, he dragged up a small girl, barefoot, thin, covered in dirt. Her eyes were wide and lifeless, her face streaked with something darker than dust. "She's no good to me," he barked. "Can't talk, don't hear a damn thing. Just stares at the wall like some broken. Mutt, someone take her." Silence. Laughter from the back. A man spat at the floor. "2 bottles of rye. Hell, 1. The girl stood motionless beside him. Didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Elias watched from the shadows, eyes sharp beneath his hat brim. The girl looked like she hadn't been warm in weeks, maybe longer. He saw her bare feet curled against the dirty floorboards. She didn't shake, didn't beg, just stood like a ghost in a dress 2 sizes too small. "I'll take her," Elias said. The drunk froze, squinting through bleary eyes. "What?" Elias stepped forward. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I said, I'll take her." No one spoke. A few murmured behind their cards. The barkeep looked up, puzzled. The prospector blinked, then laughed. "Hell, all right, she's all yours, mister." Elias dropped $3 on the table, took the girl gently by the arm, and led her out into the snow. They rode in silence. The girl sat stiff in front of him, eyes forward, back straight, frozen more from fear than cold. She didn't lean against him, didn't look up once. She didn't seem to hear the horse's hooves crunching beneath them or the wind whistling through the pine. It took hours to reach the ranch. The trail was long and half vanished beneath the snow. Elias said nothing. Neither did she. The homestead stood alone beneath the ridge, a patchwork of old logs and sturdy timber, wind-battered but strong. A barn leaned nearby, its roof sagging under snow. Beyond that, the mountains loomed, eternal and indifferent. Elias dismounted and lifted the girl down. She didn't resist. Didn't help. Inside, the fire crackled low. The air smelled of smoke, pine and silence. He laid out a blanket near the hearth and pointed. "Sleep." She stood still, eyes darting. Then turned and padded toward the barn. He let her go. Through a crack in the wall, Elias watched as she found a corner, curled into a ball, and pulled hay over her body. He stared at her for a long time. The next morning, Elias placed a tin cup of water and half a biscuit on the table. The girl stood by the door, arms crossed, face blank. He pushed the food forward and gestured. "Eat." She didn't move. He mimicked a chewing motion, then held the biscuit out. She didn't flinch, but neither did she reach. "All right then," he muttered, placing it on a napkin. She didn't eat until he left the room. Over the days that followed, Elias worked the ranch while keeping one eye on her. He repaired fences, chopped firewood, milked the cow, all with the slow rhythm of a man used to working alone. Sometimes he tried to speak, Sometimes he gestured. Basic things. Come, sit, eat. She never responded. Not once. He began to believe she was fully deaf. One evening after supper, Elias sat by the fire, a half-carved toy horse in his hands. His knife moved slow, steady. He thought he saw her watching from the hallway, just a flicker of a shadow before she slipped away. Later, that night, he went to the barn and left a folded blanket beside her. Didn't say a word. Elias kept trying. He made her a place at the table even if she never sat there. He carved a tiny bed frame and placed it near the hearth, small and sturdy. She wouldn't sleep in it, but she watched him build it. And he let her. A week passed. Maybe more. The snow began to melt in patches, revealing dead grass beneath. Elias was chopping wood when he saw something in her hands. A small ragged doll, stuffed with straw, missing a leg. Its face was blackened from fire, but one detail remained. On the sole of the cloth foot, a name burned in with a hot knife. Sarah. He froze, wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Sarah, he said softly. The girl looked up just for a second, and then looked away. That night, Elias sat alone with the doll in his hand. She'd dropped it outside after feeding the chickens, too busy watching a bird struggle to fly against the wind. He'd waited to give it back. He stared at the name, traced it with his thumb. Sarah, he whispered again, as if the word meant something ancient and important. The next day he left the doll on her bed. That night, it was gone. Elias dreamed of Lucy again, his daughter, bright-eyed and loud, riding on his shoulders, laughing through the wind. Then, smoke, screams. The barn on fire. His wife coughing, dragging Lucy through smoke that swallowed them whole. He woke in the dark. The fire had burned low. Across the room, Sarah slept in the corner, the blanket drawn up over her shoulders. He stared at her. Not his daughter. Not his ghost. But something living. Spring crept in. The wind was softer. Trees began to bud. Elias found Sarah in the barn one morning, feeding the cow a handful of hay with both hands. She didn't notice him watching. She hummed, not music, just a sound, soft, barely there. He leaned against the post and said nothing. For the first time, she seemed not entirely afraid, not safe, not yet, but not alone. The land was hard, the winters harder, but sometimes it gave back. Sometimes even silence could speak, and sometimes it could be heard. The soil was dry and stubborn, like the land itself had given up trying to grow anything. But Elias knelt in it anyway, pressing seeds deep into the earth with thick, calloused fingers. Beside him, Sarah crouched, hands tucked in her lap, watching. He showed her how to dig a shallow row, how to scatter the seeds, cover them gently, water, not drown. The way Lucy had once liked to do it, splattering mud everywhere and laughing like it was a game made just for her. Sarah made no sound, no smile. She just stared with those wide, dark eyes that never gave anything away. A chicken clucked nearby, scratching at the dirt. Elias tossed a pebble to scare it off. Sarah didn't even blink. The days were getting longer. The snow had retreated into the shadows of the forest, leaving behind a soaked and splintered world. But Elias felt something else creeping in too. Quiet, subtle, like grass returning after fire. One morning, while tightening the post around a garden gate, Elias gestured to her, pointing to a fallen rake. She didn't move. He repeated it. Open palm, then pointing again. And this time, she moved. She stood, walked to the rake, picked it up with slow, deliberate fingers, and brought it to him. Then she raised her hand and mimicked his gesture. Open palm. Point. Elias froze. Then he nodded, almost too softly for himself to notice. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Worn, small, but real. He took the rake. Good, he said. And though she didn't react outwardly, he saw something settle behind her eyes. A recognition. A quiet acceptance. Maybe even the tiniest thread of trust. Sarah began to shadow him more closely. In the barn, She watched how he milked the cow. In the chicken coop, she copied how he scattered seed. Never speaking, never smiling, but her eyes followed every movement with sharp, deliberate attention. At night, she sat closer to the fire. She held the doll sometimes. Other times, she stared into the flames like they were speaking. And then the sounds began. Elias noticed it. One evening, she turned her head when the door creaked open behind her. Just slightly. Just a flicker. A few nights later, he saw her flinch when the wind howled through a crack in the roof, moaning like a ghost. He decided to test it. The next morning, he stood behind her in the barn, dropped a metal pan. She didn't move. Not a blink. Not a flinch. Nothing. But something still gnawed at him. Later that night, as the fire cracked softly, Elias carved a small flute out of pine wood. Not to play, but to remember. He began to hum. An old lullaby, the kind Lucy loved, the one she used to beg for when the winds cried outside. "Sleep, little dove, don't cry to the wind." And Sarah looked up, not at the fire, not at the doll, at him, right at him. Her eyes were wide, unreadable, but alert. Elias stopped. She lowered her gaze. He sat in silence for a long time after that, the song half sung, his thoughts louder than the flames. She heard something, maybe not everything, but something. 2 days later, Elias rode into the nearest town, Rawbend, a dusty spit of buildings strung along a dry creek. He needed feed, nails, coffee, and to listen. At the general store, talk was bitter and low. The crows hit Jacobson's ranch last week, took 2 head and burned his shed down. They say they're coming from the West Trail, using the old Indian routes. Damn vultures. Elias kept his head down, listening. Then came a voice, sharp, mocking. Well, Boone's in town. Thought you were part of the dust by now." He looked up. A thick-necked man in a wide-brimmed hat, chewing a toothpick, leaned against a post. A few others loitered near him, watching with wolfish grins. "Word is you picked up some baggage," the man said. "Real charitable taking in someone else's trash." Elias said nothing, just stared. The man chuckled, spit. "Careful out there, Boone. These are dangerous times." Elias turned, walked away, and didn't stop until he was on the trail home. That night, he unpacked the rifle, cleaned it, oiled it, set traps along the outer edge of the property. Snares, tripwires, warning bells. The crows were real. And someone had taken notice of him. He couldn't afford mistakes. Not anymore. The wind kicked up again by dusk. Cooler now, sharper, a storm brewing. Inside, he led Sarah to the edge of the porch, handed her the rifle, let her feel the weight of it. He tapped her shoulder, held her gaze, then fired a shot into the hills. She flinched hard, nearly dropped the rifle. He nodded, tapped his ear, pointed to the rifle, fired again. This time she didn't flinch as much. She understood, or was trying to. He took the rifle back, set it down. She stood there, shaking. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. That night she came to the hearth without being called, sat beside him on the floor, the fire painting her face in soft gold. After a long, quiet stretch, she reached over and touched his hand, just her fingers, lightly on his knuckles. Her skin was cold. He didn't move, didn't speak. Then she whispered, so faint he nearly missed it. "Thank you." The words were clumsy, hushed, but real. Elias's heart stopped. She looked down immediately like the words had burned her. He stared at her, then stood, walked to the bed, and fetched her doll, placed it beside her pillow with care. When he turned back, Sarah was already asleep, but she was smiling. The storm came down like a hammer. Clouds roared, thunder cracked through the mountains, and the wind tore across the valley like it had a grudge. Rain lashed the windows, drummed on the roof, and turned the earth outside to black soup. Elias had seen storms before, Hell, he'd lived through the kind that stripped trees bare and buried whole trails. But this one had a mean streak. The cows bawled loud and long out in the pasture. Fence posts snapped like twigs. Lightning clawed the sky. Then came the cry. High, shrill, panicked, a calf stuck in the lower creek bed. Elias cursed, grabbed his slicker and rifle, and turned to Sarah. "Seller," he said, firm but gentle. "You stay." She hesitated, wide-eyed. He knelt, pressed her shoulder. "Safe down there." She nodded, hugging the doll tight. He led her to the hatch in the kitchen floor, helped her down, and latched it shut behind her. Then he rode out. Coat, whipping, the world a blur of water and shadow. The calf had slipped between two jagged rocks, legs thrashing, one eye wild with terror. Elias tied a rope, coaxed it out inch by inch, the mud fighting him with every pull. It took an hour, maybe more. When he finally rode back, drenched to the bone, the sky now darker than sin, something was wrong. The front door of the cabin hung crooked on its hinges, cracked open like a yawn. The wind had no business doing that. Elias dismounted fast, rifle in hand, mud sucking at his boots. The cellar hatch was wide open, his gut twisted. "Sarah!" Nothing. He ran through the cabin. Empty. The fire cold. The doll on the floor. Out in the barn, the horses were gone. On the back wall, charred into the wood with fire or blade, was a crude, jagged shape. A crow. Its wings spread wide. The head tilted. Mocking. The world went silent in Elias's head. Even. The rain dulled. He breathed slow, deep, eyes scanning. Tracks. Muddy prints leading away from the barn. 4, maybe 5 sets of boots. A smaller one dragged. He dropped to a crouch, fingers to the earth, twigs broken. Mud shifted. He followed, into the trees, down a slope slick with storm water. A torn ribbon snagged on a bush. Sarah's. He moved, with quiet purpose, each step calculated. He'd hunted men before. Confederate deserters years ago, rustlers later. Evil had a smell when it passed through the woods, and this trail reeked of it. He passed a bent pine, found a scrap of cloth, then the branches parted, and he saw her face. Not Sarah's, Lucy's, flashing through his mind, laughing in the snow, dancing under rain, then cold, still, gone. He blinked, and Sarah was there again, fragile, taken. He pressed on. The trail dipped into a ravine, deep, shaded, full of fog. Then, a snap. Behind him, Elias spun. Too late. A knife pressed to his throat. The grip was firm, silent. A figure loomed from the dark. Bare chest, painted face, eyes sharp as obsidian. Native. They locked eyes. No words. Then, from behind the rocks, movement. A man stepped forward, rifle raised. Elias moved, the blade at. His neck shifted, but the native struck first, quick and clean. Threw the knife into the man's thigh. Gunfire lit up the mist. Elias dove, rolled, returned fire. The native fought beside him, fast, brutal, silent. 2 men fell. 1 ran. Elias chased, rifle barking thunder into the gorge. Silence returned. Bodies cooled in the mud. The native stood beside him, breathing. Hard but steady, Elias lowered his weapon. "Thanks," he said. The man didn't reply, just nodded once. Later, by a fire tucked into the rocks, they sat across from each other. Elias passed him a tin cup of warmed beans. The man took it, drank, then touched his chest. "Wounded," he said, then pointed to himself. Elias stared at him, nodded. "Boone," he said, touching his own chest. The man looked to the sky. Made a strange, graceful motion with his hand, fingers tracing the arc of the stars. Boone didn't understand, but something in it felt like hope. Like the storm wasn't all there was. He nodded again, then looked into the darkness where Sarah was, waiting, somewhere, and whispered, "We find her." Dawn cracked over the outlaw camp like a split vein of light. Fog clung low, curling through dead trees and broken brush. The fire had burned down to smoldering ash. Boots were strewn beside tents, bottles tipped in the mud. Sleep held the men, like a drug. But not Elias. He lay low on the ridge, eyes locked on the crooked shack at the far end of camp. The only building that looked nailed shut. She was in there. He felt it. Beside him, the tracker, wounded, checked his bow, eyes scanning. For movement, Elias motioned. Now they moved like wolves. Low, fast. Wounded slipped around the edge of the camp, finding shadows like he'd invented them. Elias crept between crates and overturned wagons, rifle slung low. Inside the shack, Sarah sat in the dirt, hands tied, her face streaked with dust and bruises, but calm, alert. She tapped the wooden wall beside her. 4 short taps, a pause, then one long one. Morse. She was sending a message. She heard. Elias slipped past the first sentry, muffled the man with a hand over the mouth and knife to the ribs. Quick! Quiet! He reached the shack, pressed to the wall. Inside, Sarah's tapping, paused. She looked toward the door. She knew. Elias creaked it open. She gasped, and for one terrible second, he thought she might scream, but she only smiled. Then, snap. A shout from behind the tents. Gunfire. Chaos. The tracker loosed an arrow, striking. A bandit clean through the shoulder. Another fired wildly. Elias kicked the door open, lifted Sarah into his arms, and ran. Bullets cracked past. One bandit closed in from the left, revolver raised. Wounded charged him, knife in one hand, tomahawk in the other. They grappled. Blood flew. Another shot rang. Elias ducked behind a broken cart, shielding Sarah with his coat. She trembled, but didn't cry. Didn't break. Then she screamed. Behind you! Elias spun. A rusted shotgun aimed at his back. He fired. The bandit dropped. He turned to her. She was crying now, but not from fear, from release. They ran. Wounded limped behind them, blood soaking his leg. They made for the ravine, slipped into a cave hidden beneath a rock overhang, and collapsed. Elias set Sarah down gently, checked her face, arms, no serious wounds. Wounded leaned against the wall, eyes closed, pain tight on his brow. Elias grabbed a needle, thread, whiskey. This'll hurt, he said. Wounded just nodded. As he stitched, Sarah crouched nearby, watching. Finally, Elias asked, voice low. How long? She tilted her head. How long have you been able to hear? She hesitated. Then, since the fire. Elias paused. I pretended not to, she said. They hurt me less that way. Elias put down the needle. She wasn't broken. She was brilliant, brave. All this time, silence had been her armor. He reached out, took her small, scraped hand in his. You're safe now. She nodded, but it was the tears in her eyes that said it best. Months passed. Summer laid a golden sheet across the valley. The grass was high, the trees thick with green. In a small one-room schoolhouse on the edge of town, Sarah sat beside a younger girl, also deaf. She spoke with her hands, then softly with her voice, both learning, both teaching. Elias stood outside, watching through the window. Clean shirt, trimmed beard, not so haunted anymore. Behind him, on the ridge, a single figure, on horseback, appeared. Wounded. He didn't come down. Just sat a moment, then raised a hand in a quiet, respectful salute. Elias raised his back. Nothing more needed. In a land where silence often meant death, a lonely rancher and a silent girl taught each other to hear again. Not with ears, but with trust. If their story touched you, leave a comment below. Subscribe for more untold legends of the frontier.